Welcome, folks. I am Jaby Koay, joined by ACHARA KIRK.
What's up?
We're looking at a new Rockstars video, Spider-Man No Way Home breakdown, Easter eggs, and details you missed. Just as a heads up, in case you didn't see the timestamp, this is going to be a long one. The video that we're looking at is 38 minutes, so I can only imagine how long our video is going to end up being. So strap yourselves in and sit back, relax, grab a popcorn, something, I don't know, and I'll watch this. Thank you, new Rockstars, for allowing us to react to this. Very, very much appreciate it. Y'all, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications, and pretty please vote this up to let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. Also, subscribe to new Rockstars. There's a link in the description below. Click on that, give the original an upvote, etc., etc. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Spider-Man No Way Home, a true Spider-Verse event that, start to finish, is a love letter to the web slinger's full cinematic history, not only by bringing back past Peter Parkers, but in even smaller ways, echoing little moments that prove how, despite all these guys' different backgrounds, these dorks were destined to cross paths and rescue each other. So I'm gonna break this down scene by scene for everything you might have missed. And folks, I think I found more Easter eggs in this movie than I have in anything I've ever broken down on this channel.
Oh my God.
Before we begin, you can celebrate Spider-Man No Way Home by checking out our awesome merch at newrockstarsmerch.com. We have this amazing new limited edition shirt, one of my favorite shirts Epic Hero Shop has ever made, called Strange Entanglement. I can't wait to get mine. It's gonna be my favorite Christmas gift. You can get yours at newrockstarsmerch.com. And thank you to Boxu for sponsoring this video. More on them later. Okay, the opening Marvel Studios title card has been updated slightly so that if you look closely on the whole of the R, replacing Rocket, who was in recent MCU titles, is now Peter Parker. The moment he came back through that portal, joined Cap and Endgame, this movie will also make grown men cry, seeing Spider-Man arrive through portals twice. So we open immediately where Far From Home left off, the audio of the news broadcast of J. Jonah Jameson's Daily Bugle revealing Peter Parker's identity by Mysterio's doctored footage. Director John Watts recreated that 2019 scene to near perfect detail before it ended by cutting off Peter's F-bomb. What the which itself was a callback to Aunt May's final line in Homecoming. What the But now a car horn censors out the word, and MJ is once again in her Joan of Arc shirt, but the three extras behind her are dressed exactly like the three guys behind MJ in the Far From Home scene. But the one major difference is that MJ now wears the broken black Dahlia necklace that Peter bought her in Venice and gave to her in London.
I actually like it. You don't remember that?
This necklace is the key to Peter and MJ's relationship because in the final scene, despite her memory of Peter being erased, something compels her to keep wearing that. Proof that she wasn't just with Peter because he was Spider-Man, and that she will wait forever for that I love you because she likes things better broken. Notice how one of the onlookers says, "Who's just a kid?" Just like one of the onlookers on the train says in Spider-Man 2 when that Peter got unmasked.
He's just a kid.
Peter swings MJ through Times Square, where Jameson's inescapable broadcast includes an image of Peter's face half covered, as it often is in the Spider-Man comics, and they pass two billboards for Rogers the Musical, the Captain America musical from Hawkeye on Disney+. Peter lands MJ on the Queensboro Bridge, where they are spotted by passengers on the nearby Roosevelt Island tramway, famous from the 2002 Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, as the setting of the final battle where Green Goblin made Peter choose between Mary Jane or suffer the children. And then right after getting that Tobey era reference, we get an Andrew Garfield era reference when Peter thwips the manhole cover, recalling the very last time we saw Andrew Garfield on screen as Spider-Man. This is in front of Del Mar's Deli in Queens, Peter's favorite spot that showed up in Homecoming and in a deleted scene in Far From Home. But notice how it now reads Del Mar's 3 for this being the third Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. Back in their apartment, Aunt May dumps Happy. Oh, but then they walk in on MJ and Peter declothed, calling back Aunt May walking in on Peter and Ned just like this in Homecoming. But John Watts shoots all of this in a full 2-minute long take to heighten that awkwardness, and kudos to these 4 actors because the timing is so precise. Like when Peter fails to close the window shade the first time, he then thwips it shut, which feels improvised, like Tom Holland screwed up closing it the first time, but then was just like, oh, Peter could flip it, and then they added in the VFX of the webbing after that. Also notice how Peter wears the same I survived my trip to NYC shirt that he wore in Homecoming as he came back home after Mr. Stark confiscated his suit. It's less baggy on him now because our little guy is grown up. Daily Bugle broadcast hammer away at Peter. You see a Daily News front page photoshopping mugshots using their yearbook photos and revealing MJ's name as Michelle Jones Watson. For the first time, adding the Watson like her counterpart Mary Jane Watson. Time magazine calls him Iron Man Jr. and shows him crying like a baby. In Touch Weekly calls him Two-Faced, and then Peter gets doused in green paint, while newsreel footage of Tower Bridge includes the ticker political turmoil continues in New Asgard. So I guess Valkyrie's rule over that colony in Tonsberg, Norway might be a bit unstable, something we could see more of in Thor: Love and Thunder. Investigators recover the drones from Far From Home, linking them to Stark, giving investigators grounds to arrest Peter. The DODC returns, Department of Damage Control, who cleaned up Avenger messes in Homecoming, now led by Agent Cleary. Albert Cleary is the DODC comptroller in the comics. They take some evidence photos photos showing a framed photo of Ned and MJ from the homecoming dance. Interesting how Peter is not in that picture though. Keep that in mind. We see Peter's Star Wars figurines. There's a photo taken of the Iron Spider charging station without the suit in it though. And you see a rectangle of plugs into that one wall outlet. Also, we see the Edith glasses that Mysterio was trying to steal from him and a bunch of PlayStation games because Sony. During the interrogation, Peter wears the physics are theoretical but the fun is real shirt that he wore in Spider-Man Homecoming when Tony Stark dropped him off back in Queens. Agent Cleary says Fury's been off planet for the past year. So Peter thought he was talking to Fury during Far From Home, but he was actually talking with the Skrull Talos, also confirming that the DODC is more aware of Fury's movements than most Avengers are. Also that Agent Cleary just made my list of Skrull suspicious ahead of Secret Invasion. Because how else would he know that? Stark Industries, the company itself, gets swept up in the investigation, so I guess Morgan Stark's gonna have to go to public school. The file photo they used of Patty Hogan was his look from Iron Man 3 Prologue in 1999 when he had long hair and the bolo tie like Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction. And blowing our minds in the first 10 minutes, they get legal counsel from freaking Charlie Cox, Matt Murdock, Daredevil from the Netflix series, a crossover even crazier than Toby and Andrew in my book, because A, this is permanent in the MCU, and B, it presents wilder implications for the MCU, suggesting that much, if not all of what we saw in the Netflix Marvel shows could now be MCU canon. And we just saw Cox's co-star Vincent D'Onofrio appearing as Kingpin in Hawkeye, and that finale episode will apparently give us some clarity on the exact canonicity of all those stories.
Oh my
to be clear, this Matt Murdock is the superpowered Daredevil. A brick flies in through the window and he catches it with lightning fast reflexes, but I love how Peter's hand was also ready to catch that brick too, since he has Spidey sense. Also, fun fact, Jon Favreau played Foggy Nelson in the 2003 Daredevil. Cool! So they have to move into Happy's condo where he's
completely forgot about that
robot that we saw in the first Iron Man film, also recovered in Iron Man 3, and we saw Happy yelling at it in Homecoming. Now, first on the TV, there are some people complaining about the new changes to the Statue of Liberty, which I agree. Why would you add Cap Shield to it? Also, while they're in the condo, Happy watches Downton Abbey, just as he did in Iron Man 3 when he was in recovery, and by the door, he has a bunch of spare security badges hanging. This was after he lectured everyone in Iron Man 3 that they have to have their one badge on them at all times. As Peter and MJ FaceTime, in MJ's room hangs her sketches of Peter with a rain cloud over his head, but also that one of Coach Wilson from Homecoming.
Why are you here? You don't even have detention.
Oh, I know. I just like coming here to sketch people in crisis. It's you.
There's also that same photo of her and Ned from Homecoming, again without Peter in it, and a photo of pigeons in Venice. And on the bed behind her, she is reading Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. In this conversation, Peter mentions his spider bite.
Ever since I got bit by that spider, I've only had 1 week where my life has felt normal.
This is actually only the second time in the MCU that Peter really referenced that bite after his chat with Ned in Homecoming.
You got bit by a spider? Can it bite me? Well, it probably would have hurt, right? You know what, whatever. Even if it did hurt, I would let it bite me. Maybe. How much did it hurt?
The spider's dead, Ned.
Betty Brant hosts the Midtown Morning News still, a job that she apparently also balances with being an intern for the Daily Bugle on TikTok. And she says, "Go get him, Tiger," Mary Jane's catchphrase for Peter in the comics and in the past films. Also, you can hear someone in the crowd yelling, "Do a flip!" just like that guy in Homecoming. Do a flip! Who also came back in Shang-Chi. The protester signs include several pro-Mysterio ones, one calling Peter Devil in Disguise. So this movie's premise is loosely based on the Spider-Man One More Day comic, in which Peter goes to Doctor Strange in search of a spell to make everyone forget that he's Spider-Man, but ends up having to turn to a little girl who is revealed as Mephisto to do this instead, and actually ends with a similar reset as this film, in which Peter's identity is a secret once more, but at the cost of his relationships with MJ and with his friend. It was a very controversial comic when it came out, but like many great MCU movies, it turned a pretty divisive comic storyline into a really great work of cinema. In the crowd, there's also an MJ supporter. This is a cameo by Darnell Appling, an actor and Zendaya's real-life assistant. Flash has published a tell-all book called Flashpoint, which is probably a nod to the DC Comics preceding timeline crossover event, with Barry Allen meeting alternate versions of himself and of Batman, which is being adapted into another cross-franchise event with The Flash in 2022. The school's mural of great inventors throughout history that showed Howard Stark in Homecoming has also now added the faces of Abraham Erskine, who is the inventor of Cap Super Soldier Serum, as well as Hank Pym in the upper right.
Yeah, so I caught Hank Pym.
You caught that.
I caught Stark's father. There's also Carl Sagan in the background. Not that that's an MCU reference at all, but I believe I saw Carl Sagan in the background as well.
Coach Wilson, Mr. Dell, and Mr. Harrington greet Peter with a display case of Peter's academic decathlon awards and his blazer. There's also a photo of Peter and MJ in Venice where it looks like Mr. Harrington might have pasted himself in for one of his selfies that he took then. Later on the rooftop, MJ reads a New York Post. That is the salacious tabloid that they actually based the earlier Daily Bugle designs on, reading Peter Parker and his spider minions, showing Peter puppeting Ned and MJ. Below reading, his hypnotic spider senses seduced Jones Watson. Male spiders actually do release hypnosis-like pheromones, and ironically, Peter does allow MJ and Ned to be brainwashed, but to forget about him. Peter rolls over.
Right.
I completely didn't put that together.
Yeah.
The way it's talked about in the movie, is talked about in terms of capturing someone and like into your, seducing them.
Right, yeah.
Not like brainwashing them to go away.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
yeah. No, that was a good like little inference reference thing.
For to kiss her, and the textbook that he rested his head on was chemistry. I see what you did there. I thought we wouldn't notice, but well, we did. Also, written graffiti on the background is Ditko, a reference to Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko. Peter gets rejected from college after college. Dumb E gradually reassembles Peter's Death Star until the MIT one comes in and Dummy just breaks
I
it,
love
just like
that
Ned
callback.
did. And all three of the friends get rejected, which is a bummer because MIT is Tony Stark's alma mater, where he handed out scholarships in Civil War, and where future Ironheart Riri Williams goes to school. The witch string lights actually have little goatees, making them little Doctor Stranges, giving Peter the idea of what Avenger to return to, and we hear the notes of Doctor Strange's theme here that leads Peter to 1778 Bleecker
did
Street,
we?
the Sanctum Sanctorum. Inside, one of the shoveling apprentices is played by Emily Fong, who worked production on Infinity War, Endgame, Shang-Chi, and Black Widow. Wong arrives and explains how one of the Rotunda gateways opened to Siberia and let a blizzard in. We saw those gateways in the 2016 film. I will say, the production of this movie went to an insane amount of effort to freeze over the Sanctum for just a, left the door open to Siberia gag. I'm wondering, with those floodwaters pouring into the Sanctum and the Multiverse of Madness teaser, this may be a bigger indicator of this reality destabilizing. Strange floats in wearing a Columbia University hoodie. Columbia is his alma mater. We see another one of these hoodies floating by the laundry machines downstairs, and he's carrying a mug reading, "Oh, for Fox's sake." We learned that.
That is a cute mug.
This seems like the Sanctum Sanctorum is always falling apart. It's being barely held together with scotch tape and bubble gum. It feels that way because it's like the blizzard really, like, you go like, come on.
It was a very elaborate gag.
I suppose it helps with how everything kind of falls apart in the movie. With Doctor Strange, messing up his own spell. The excuse is Peter interrupted him, but things aren't as solid as they would or should be.
It might be to do with like the power struggle, perhaps. They put that whole thing in there about how Wong got to be Sorcerer Supreme on a technicality.
Looking at these superheroes like gods, they are imperfect. They are very much imperfect with powers that could wreak havoc. I feel like this speaks to, it's like Doctor Strange and Wong, they're very, very powerful people, but they are so flawed. And the Sanctum Sanctorum being a wreck with snow, it speaks to that. I think that opens up in a subconscious way the possibility that things could go wrong, such as a spell erasing everybody's memory of Peter Parker.
Right.
Or
I mean, that's the correct way.
I said that wrong. I apologize. Erasing Peter Parker from everybody's memory, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, the spell could go wrong because they're not completely all focused. They're not completely all there.
They're fallible.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the point. I think that's the point of the Sanctum Sanctorum being covered in snow with the broken portal or whatever. It's just to illustrate in a subconscious way that they are fallible people.
Sure.
Wong actually holds the rank of Sorcerer Supreme since Strange blipped for 5 years. Since WandaVision told us that Scarlet Witch's powers surpass those of the Sorcerer Supreme, that might mean Strange might be even lower on that sorcerer hierarchy than we thought and might need her help even more. Strange says that Peter's request to reverse time is selfish, plus the time stone was atomized. But Peter says, quote, "It's not about me. I mean, this is really hurting a lot of people." In doing so, Peter uses the same words that the Ancient One used in her crucial lesson to Strange.
It's not about you.
And so Strange agrees to help him, using a spell called the Runes of Kafkal. Not sure the spelling, but Kafkal isn't from any of the comics that I know of, but what Wong says, the memory wiping spell travels the dark border between known and unknown realities, suggesting that to enact the spell, you have to kind of bridge with other realities of the multiverse. And he leaves them through a portal. You see that bell tower in the background, that's actually in the Kamartaj courtyard. Strange explains how the Sanctum is built at an intersection of cosmic energy currents, that they weren't the first to seek this out, with walls thousands of years old, and that they shot an episode of The Equalizer there in the 80s. The spell goes crazy, and Peter shouts, basically everyone who knew that I was Spider-Man before should still know. That is the rule by which characters get warped into this reality, also suggesting that Kirsten Dunst, Mary Jane, both Harry Osborn, several others might have also been briefly walking around in the MCU, but also tells us that Venom, through his multiversal symbiote hive mind, must have known that Peter is Spider-Man, though I didn't know when Electro found out that Peter was Spider-Man, unless there's some kind of Spider-Man Mandela effect.
Who cares? Bring them all in.
Right? Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that was kind of refrigerator logic when we left the theater and we're like, hold on.
No, but you did call that out at the theater. Because you were trying to articulate it, but you sort of stumbled over your own words. But I think internally you sort of knew before you said anything out loud.
Yeah, like, because I was trying to explain to you why I thought Eddie Brock was in, this universe with the Spider-Man and stuff. And then it made sense for a second, but I didn't quite grasp the concept of the hive mind. But I had this feeling of like, no, like somehow deep down he knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but yet, like you said, I couldn't quite articulate it. And so like I'm really happy to see this because that makes it make more sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the notion of the other villains walking around in, you know, Tom Holland's Spider-Man universe, I don't think that's actually what happened. I think the bad guys we saw are pretty much the bad guys that showed up. Because in that scene, you know, Doctor Strange talks about how he contained the spell, but a few squeaked through.
Yes.
The ones we saw are the ones that squeaked through. Are the ones that squeaked through. So I think that, you know, James Franco, any other villains that we did not see, they didn't squeak through. I mean, that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, he was also saying that there was this potential idea that characters like MJ, like Mary Jane Watson, she might have come through and all that, but yeah, no, most likely not.
Well, if they did, it doesn't matter because they...
Yeah, because they weren't in the movie.
They squeaked back.
It's possible. As this purple void surrounds them, Strange sees a glowing silhouette that
the
looks
rhino.
like the glowing arms of Doc Ock, him being one of the characters that are currently spilling into this reality. So Strange has to encase this spell in a prism.
I'm talking about the end. I was trying to pick out the silhouettes at the end. He'll probably talk about it.
Yeah.
But the only one that I could recognize or pick out was the rhino. That's it.
Oh, yeah, no, I couldn't even.
Similar to how Strange and What If encases Killmonger, Infinity, and Zola Ultron in a prism to contain that reality-rupturing chaos. But this prism is a dodecahedron, which is made up of pentagons with 5 sides and 5 corners because Peter changed his spell 5 times. Strange thought it was 6, but if you listen back, Peter changed it for MJ, for Ned, for Aunt May, for Happy, and then for everyone who knew. That's 5. So what was the 6th? Well, the 6th may have been a secret change by Doctor Strange so that he would still remember Peter because he loves him. Peter suits up.
I did catch that. Man, like that moment, Benedict Cumberbatch, man. When he goes, you know, everyone's gonna forget. Like everyone who knows and loves you, he made a point to say we will forget.
He?
Yeah, that touched me. I was like, oh, just thinking about it.
You know, he pretends to be a hard exterior asshole type guy, but you know,
he's a softy inside.
He's a softy on the inside.
Peter suits up in the Iron Spider armor, using extra wings to glide the bridge, and inside his heads-up display, you can read up in the corner, Edith offline. Also, the voice has changed to male, and that's because the DODC has confiscated and disabled all the drone network. It's interesting that they did not take this Iron Spider suit too, but again, when they raided his place, that suit was not charging in the port. So I don't know, maybe Peter tried to flush the nanotech down the toilet. Now on this bridge, there are a ton of license plates, and I can tell you folks, I looked at all of them because John Watts loves to hide Easter eggs in his license plates. But the only ones I could actually decode to mean anything were a Nissan with SEYS1DP, and earlier there was an anagram book on Peter's shelf, so this plate rearranges to Spideys. Which could be a clue for multiple Spideys being in this movie. And of course, the MIT woman's car is 63A5M3 or 63ASM3 for 1963 Amazing Spider-Man #3, the comic debut of Dr. Octopus, who arrives in the scene, played once more by Alfred Molina from the 2004 Spider-Man 2. He looks awesome. Composer Michael Giacchino samples Danny Elfman's Doc Ock theme from that film, and as his claws smash through this bridge, note that the claws light up red, which in that 2004 film was how we knew when the claws were controlling Otto's brain. So this must have happened before Peter converted him, at which point the lights flickered back white.
I'm wondering now how many samples, how many songs were sampled in this movie.
Probably a lot.
Because one of the things I remarked on in our review was that I really liked the music in the film, and that might be because so much of it was sampled from other stuff.
That totally makes sense. It's like a really nice way to pay homage to the older films.
The multiverse of music!
The multiverse of music, yeah, and to just kind of, bring the character themes back. And I think that's a really smart idea. It's a lovely detail.
Doc Ock brings up his machine here, his fusion device that he was working on in the movie.
What have you done with my machine?
And he quotes his line from the 2004 film, his whole goal.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Now, at one point, you'll notice Peter webs one of the claws to a car door to make it harder for Doc Ock to grab anything else to throw at him.
Nice
Doc
detail.
Ock pries off some of Peter's nanotech, which then absorbs onto his arms. So if you remember back to the first Raimi film, Norman Osborn was an expert on nanotech.
I'm something of a scientist myself. I read all your research on nanotechnology, really brilliant.
And in the sequel, Octavius built his arms using Oscorp tech.
I'd like to thank Harry Osborn and Oscorp Industries for providing it.
And he explained how he controls these arms using a neural link.
These smart arms are controlled by my brain through a neural link. Nanowires feed directly into my cerebellum.
And since the Stark nanotech is controlled neurally as well, that would allow Doc Ock's tech to be compatible with it. However, that link goes both ways, so Peter is able to pair with the arms and control the arms remotely. And then Otto snaps at his arms saying, "Listen to me," calling back what he said at the end of the 2004 film.
Listen to me. now.
Then Green Goblin swoops in, but Doctor Strange portals them back to the crypt where the lizard is already contained. Doc Ock asks Strange if this is a birthday party, just like Tony Stark referenced Doctor Strange's Jimmy Kimmel bit when they first met.
What is your job exactly besides making balloon animals?
Peter enlists MJ and Ned. Ned asks Doctor Strange,
how did you know you were made of magic? Because my Nana says that we have it in our family, and sometimes I get these tinglings in my hands.
You should talk to your physician.
And later, Nana's home has a display of
I was wondering
ancient
about that.
blades, and Ned successfully operates the sling ring, which surprises Strange. So yes, it really does seem like Ned might have a future as a sorcerer in the MCU.
But he didn't say what the knives are about.
No, he just said that they, if you rewind back, he says that they were like magical artifacts or something.
Oh yeah, because I saw that in the movie, and I was looking at because it's a single of that. It's an insert.
Every single time, we were always looking at that, and like I noticed it too. But I'm like, what does it mean?
What are the implications?
Yeah, like why would you cut to that?
Later, Nana's home has a display of ancient blades, and Ned successfully operates the sling ring, which surprises Strange. So yes, it really does seem like Ned might have a future as a sorcerer in the MCU. Then down in the Undercroft, there's all kinds of creepy goodies. A doll turns its head at them. In the fridge are a bunch of creatures, a floating eyeball in a jar, a claw creeping out from under foil. MJ finds a goatee guard that Strange must use to get his goatee perfectly shaved. And then MJ goes on TikTok to find people on homemade gliders replicating Green Goblin. Another with a frost giant cosplay that reads, I am the Green Elf. And then at the end of this, they're finally able to track down Electro, where Peter also finds Sandman battling Electro with his suit turned inside out. Sandman helps Peter because they were on good terms at the end of the 2007 film, but Electro, Jamie Foxx, now has a new body looking a bit cooler. And while Dr. Connors later calls it out, since they didn't know each other while they worked at Oscorp in the same continuity, this new body is never really explained in the movie. Meanwhile, Willem Dafoe, Norman Osborn, my favorite actor in this movie, argues with his goblin helmet, just as he would in the 2002 film, but the argument ends with him shattering the helmet. But even after it shatters, the goblin voice laughs, meaning breaking that helmet did not destroy the identity, it just fused it into Norman's soul.
I wondered about how easily he was able to destroy that helmet. I thought that helmet was like supposed to be super, super strong for some odd reason. I don't know why I got that into my head, but he just like threw a brick at it and it broke.
Yeah.
But Norman Osborn also has his strength.
Sure, as evidenced in the film, like just like pushing Spider-Man through floors in the condo, just like bah, 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 bah.
Yeah, exactly.
Notice the framing of this broken mask as Norman walks away matches the framing of Tobey Maguire Peter leaving his suit behind in the garbage can in the 2004 film. But in both cases, the characters get dragged back into the game. Peter returns to the Feast facility. That's the homeless center where Peter works in the comics and the games. Someone tagged the sign outside with Mysterio was right and a green circle over Peter's head, just like Mysterio's fishbowl helmet. Inside, Norman plays a convincing, mentally disturbed man saying, someone's at my house. Oscorp doesn't exist. My son. And he trails off, referring to Harry Osborn, of course, but also telling us that Oscorp, at least any company named that, is not currently in the MCU anywhere. Notice how he wears a green coat over those purple sweats, Goblin's colors. Meanwhile, Aunt May's costume is worth looking at. She was wearing a blue jumper with a red sash that could be foreshadowing the bloody wound that causes her death. Aunt May tells Peter to help Norman. Peter says, this isn't my problem, which she gets mad at him over because it recalls Tobey Maguire Peter's fateful decision not to intervene, which led to Uncle Ben's death.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
J. Jonah Jameson's upgraded Daily Bugle show, which is really thanks to his Spider-Man coverage, now pushes supplements, which is another jab at Alex Jones. The Chiron reads, why does Spider-Man hate national monuments? Recalling the Washington Monument and Homecoming and Tower Bridge and Far From Home. Meanwhile, Otto Octavius recalls the moment he warped, saying he had Spider-Man by the throat, so this must have happened right before Tobey changed him in this moment in the film.
These things have turned you into something you're not. Don't listen to them. It was my dream. Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most, even our dreams. You're right.
Meanwhile, Max talks about being absorbed into the grid, about to turn into pure energy, recalling the Amazing Spider-Man 2 when Peter and Gwen hardwired Electro to that grid and overloaded his chip. And then Lizard asks Max if he dies, but he never gets an answer, and that's because Lizard doesn't actually die in the 2012 film. He ends up locked up and approached to join a future Sinister Six. So Strange shows them the box, the MACHINA DICHOTOMOUS, in Latin roughly the division machine, which he could use to send them back to their universes. But Peter and Strange debate over this. Strange says, in the grand calculus of the multiverse, their sacrifice means infinitely more than their lives. The subtext, of course, being his guilt for sacrificing Tony Stark as part of his complex calculus from seeing 14,605 future outcomes to defeat Thanos. If you think about it, calculus was also the type of arithmetic on He Who Remains chalkboard. And I just find it interesting that Peter overcomes Strange by doing simpler geometry. It's still super nerdy, just not overthinking it, doing as much 4D chess as those guys are. So Peter snatches the box and Strange pursues him, trapping him between portals so that he whips his own foot. I love it, but then he brings Peter back to push his astral soul from his physical body, similar to observed how the Ancient One did to him. However, Peter's soulless physical body still manages to evade Strange.
Yes.
Interesting. This must be a higher form of the Spidey sense.
Did you catch that?
Yeah.
The spider sense around Peter?
Mhm,
I caught it the third time we watched the movie.
I caught it from the beginning, but I didn't make the connection until we were chatting with John, and John was like, oh, it's because of his Spidey senses that he can evade it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. It was one of those things where like I didn't really think too hard about it. I was just like, yeah, that makes sense.
It was just a fun gag.
He's got good instincts, you know?
I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
But I saw it as a fun gag in the movie. Like, why you shouldn't be able to do that. It's just funny to see.
Yeah.
It would be a neurological reflex that is divorced from Peter's conscious mind, but it also shows us how this is really linked to a kind of metaphysical magic. And later in the movie, Andrew Garfield Peter does say magic's real here too, so he might be aware of that link as well. Strange sends the Cloak of Levitation after Peter, giving us that what if Spider-Man became the Sorcerer Supreme image from the comics that we also saw in the zombie episode of What If. I love this detail. On a nearby newsstand are People magazines with Liz Allen, Peter's crush from Spider-Man Homecoming, daughter to Adrian Toomes' Vulture, calling Peter a liar.
How did you catch that?
Including Vulture. It's still somewhere in the multiverse and gonna show up in Morbius. Don't know how that's gonna make sense. Strange traps Peter in the mirror dimension. The VFX are incredible. Peter tumbles past the High Line in New York City, which Kate Bishop actually just recommended to Yelena in Hawkeye. He tumbles through a department store where you can hear Christmas music playing. Peter tumbles toward the Bethesda fountain in Central Park. It actually looks like the Angel of Water statue might have, like the Statue of Liberty, been swapped out for an Avenger. Strange traps Peter in an endless loop of portals, creating the illusion of infinite Spider-Men, as there are. And then Peter recognizes from the Archimedean spiral that he can geometry the shit out of this and trap Strange in a web of math. And again, if you want a way to really celebrate this awesome magic versus math moment, you gotta get your hands on our exclusive Strange Entanglement shirt at newrockstarsmerch.com. Norman offers to help Peter, saying, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself. Of course, his line from the 2002 movie.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Peter and Ned do their recurring handshake, and it ends with the sling ring sparking a bit, a little sign that Ned does have a kind of inner magic to him. Peter takes them to Happy's condo. The security feed glitches as Electro passes from his interference, and then Otto snaps, I don't need fixing, especially by some teenager using scraps in a bachelor's junk drawer. It's not a drawer full of scraps, it's a bunch of scraps! On the walls of Happy's room, you can actually see the name Slott. That's a reference to longtime Spider-Man writer Dan Slott. Peter activates a Stark Tech Fabricator. We saw this kind of device used on the Stark jet to design his new suit in Far From Home. It's powered by an arc reactor. This is a familiar design. This is the new Element arc reactor Mark I with a triangular inlay that Tony Stark constructed using the new element he rediscovered in Iron Man 2. I love that this is the era of arc reactor he used, because in Spider-Man Homecoming, they specifically had the Mark 42 armor that was using that same generation of arc reactor from Iron Man 3 on the Stark jet. So that would be the one that Happy still has in his possession. Meanwhile, Otto and May share some water in the kitchen. They did briefly date in the comics. Then Peter designs a new inhibitor chip for Doc Ock to replace the one that got fried in the 2004 film, and he puts in place these 6 needles that go into Otto's skin and fuse with the spinal cord. I love how they use the same exact production design from the Raimi films for all of these pieces of technology. They really clearly did their homework to look at how all of these things function. At this point, the red lights on Doc Ock's claws flicker back to bluish white, and he transfers the nanotech back to Peter to give him this golden spider, 8 arms, just like his own. It's like giving him a badge of honor there. Otto encourages his buddy Norman that he's about to rid himself of his darker half. Norman, facing away from him, says, just me. And Defoe uses his darker goblin voice in this moment, meaning he is only goblin in his mind right now. And so Peter's Spidey sense kicks in, and he just kind of wanders around the condo. It's super creepy, and notice as it begins, the first person to appear in his periphery is Norman Osborn. And the first thing Peter says is, May. It's his instinct telling him that Norman will pose a fatal threat to May. And so Peter whips Norman to dummy, which, as they came into the condo, you can see Norman in the background casing. So Goblin makes his case to the other villains. These are not curses, these are gifts. Recalling the final lines of the 2002 film, the lesson that Tobey Maguire Peter learned.
This is my gift, my curse.
When Peter had to rationalize his powers as both a gift and a curse, the fight breaks out. Peter punches Goblin, and Goblin just smiles more and more. He is loving it. That's so brutal. Apparently, Willem Dafoe insisted on doing as many stunts as he could himself.
Hold on. So there's one thing that ACHARA and I saw on the last viewing that we had of Spider-Man No Way Home. It's not relevant to anything, but to me it was humorous. It's when Aunt May's coming down the stairs, she's saging the place.
I loved that. She's like walking around barefoot, just like, Yeah, did not kill the bad juju.
Right. It was just such an interesting detail to throw in there.
I like New Age Aunt May.
Downstairs, Goblin's glider strikes May, and now that creepy face is covered in a hobgoblin-style hood, and he tosses a pumpkin bomb, which Peter bats away, showing how this goblin is just as willing to bomb an Aunt May as he was in the 2002 film.
Wow.
As she dies, May says the immortal words of Uncle Ben, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Yeah, there was a slight rewording, and that's because she said the original comic wording of the line that includes there must also come directly from Stan Lee. Folks, that hit hard. So to cheer us up, Ned uses a sling ring to portal to one of the other Peter Parkers currently in this universe, Spider-Man Andrew Garfield, a guy no one will ever believe again in interviews. Notice the music in this moment is actually James Horner's Young Peter theme from the Amazing Spider-Man film in 2012. And we just gotta pause and appreciate how great the Andrew Garfield era of the Spider-Man suit was. I mean, it's definitely my favorite aesthetically. Great shade of blue, huge eyes, and a true DIY practicality to it. One thing that era nailed. But then Ned portals again, and Tobey Maguire Peter Parker steps in, his entrance set to Danny Elfman's Spider-Man theme. And we gotta credit both Maguire and Garfield for so deftly slipping back into their mannerisms. Tobey is preemptively polite and dopey. Andrew is post-mistake apologetic and super chatty. And I also like how their first instinct upon seeing each other is to thwip attack, as if the last time either of these guys encountered a doppelganger, it might have been a hostile situation. Tobey Peter says that he'd like to hang out atop the Chrysler building, as we saw his Peter perch in the Raimi films. Andrew Peter says he'd like the Empire State Building for the view, but they find Peter on the rooftop of his school in Queens. It's not about the view, it's about a refuge from his high school life, because he never moved into the city. Andrew Peter starts to say he has some understanding of losing someone, of course referring to letting Gwen Stacy die, and he goes on to describe what happened after Gwen's death, how he stopped pulling his punches and got rageful and bitter. So apparently in that Garfield continuity, this Spider-Man might have straight up killed people, which is an insane revelation. I'm gonna explore all that in another video. But Tobey Peter,
I want to see that movie. Or show or whatever. Please, Disney Plus, give us something.
I feel like this has been the common consensus of like everyone I've talked to coming out of this is like, if Disney or if Marvel or whoever, well, it wouldn't be Disney, right? Because this is Sony. So if Sony decided to do something maybe in collaboration with Disney Plus or like made their own movies with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man again, I think there would be a lot of people who would want to watch it, myself included, and a bunch of other people that I've talked to, because we were just reminded how fantastic Andrew Garfield is as the character, but it just feels like he didn't really get the opportunity to really shine, or like that his Amazing Spider-Man movies didn't do quite as well as the others, and so they just kind of let him go, which is like a waste because he's so good.
Killed people, which is an insane revelation. I'm gonna explore all that in another video. But Tobey Peter recounts the vengeance that he felt that led him to track down Uncle Ben's murderer, and how in Spider-Man 3 that wound was reopened with Flint Marko and exacerbated by Venom, a critical lesson that he had to learn. And all three recognize the words "with great power comes great responsibility," making that proverb a kind of constant absolute point among all the Spider-Men. They return to the high school and work together to engineer cures for all of them. I love how nerdy the second half of this movie is. Tobey Peter tells Ned that his best friend died in his arms after trying to kill him, referring to Harry Osborn in Spider-Man 3. Meanwhile, Tobey Peter tells Andrew Peter that he and Mary Jane eventually made it work. Ned calls for Peter, and all three of them look up, confusedly pointing at each other. Of course, a nod to the meme. Awesome. And Tobey Peter shows how his webbing, unlike the others who use mechanical web shooters, comes freakishly out of his wrists.
We didn't catch the pointing the first time.
No, we didn't. It wasn't until the
second.
Yeah, I didn't even catch it until you were like, oh, it's the meme. That's the meme. Because I was expecting them to do it with them in costume.
Right.
So I was looking forward to like trying to scope out that thing, but it was really smart that they kind of did it that way.
It was also the angle that didn't help, because it was more dead on, whereas in the meme it looks more down at them from above, and so it's hard to catch that they're all pointing at each other right away. But like they emphasize it long enough, I'm like, oh, there it is.
And I love how Andrew Garfield really got the assignment, because he made it very clear. Because if you watch that, he's the only one who's literally, he stands like that for the entire scene. He's like,
right, I'm not gonna screw this up.
You got the assignment, Andrew.
I love how Andrew plays super grossed out, and even when Tom Holland moves the conversation along, he even continues staring at Tobey's wrist for a minute before he's like, oh, okay, yeah, what? And then on to the showdown at the Statue of Liberty. Tobey Peter's back tenses up, a callback to Peter hurting his back in the 2004 film, which itself was an inside joke about how Tobey nearly sit out of the sequel after hurting his back on Seabiscuit, and then Andrew cracks it for him for once cracking someone's backbone without killing them. Tobey talks about how he fought an alien made out of black goo, of course referring to Venom, his Eddie Brock, played by Topher Grace, and setting up Tom Hardy Venom's arrival in the post-credit scene. And then Tom Holland Peter talks about how he fought Thanos, and then Andrew's like, oh, I'm lame. I only fought a Russian guy in a rhinoceros suit, of course referring to Paul Giamatti's Rhino. But I love it. Toby Peter talks him up, saying he's actually amazing, giving Andrew Garfield the credit he deserves. Despite his amazing Spider-Man era, often ranked the lowest by fans, he's still amazing, and now he's got his brothers. But I love how the first time these Peters try to work together, it totally fails, since they are more used to being solo acts. So while Andrew and Toby teach Tom how to mourn and to forgive, Tom teaches them the one thing his era of Spider-Man had that theirs didn't: cooperation with superheroes more powerful than he is. At one point, Toby just straight up screams, "How is this helping?"
I love that.
And Andrew Peter asks if the Avengers are a band, calling back when Bruce Banner asks if the Avengers broke up like the Beatles.
The Avengers broke up. We're toast.
Like a band? Like the Beatles?
But they're able to figure it out, and a little subtle detail here that I loved: during their heroic swing, Tom Holland Peter whips to his two brothers to sling them back up with him, so that the three of them can leap together off the Statue of Liberty head right at Electro and Sandman and Lizard. Meanwhile, you see how Electro's bolts at one point higher up in a star shape around his head, like Electro's mask in the comics. Toby Peter manages to revert Thomas Hayden Church Flint Marco. I love how the device lights up and spins the same way the Super Collider did in Spider-Man 3. Then Lizard jumps into the portal with Ned and MJ, thrashing around that science lab.
I love how the Sandman thing just undoes his power and doesn't affect Peter at all, because it's just like whipping around in there with him in it. It's like, I guess that it's targeting a specific particle.
Probably,
presumably,
yeah.
and not just like meshing everything in there.
That's what we're gonna say.
Yeah.
Evoking that school battle in the 2012 film, but then Doc Ock helps them fix Electro, and they hit Lizard with the same serum gas that they use as the reigning antidote at the end of the 2012 movie, reverting him to Rhys Ifans' Dr. Connors. And Max Dillon tells Andrew Garfield Peter that he thought he was gonna be black, and that there's gotta be a black Spider-Man somewhere out there, definitely setting up Miles Morales to step up sometime soon, hopefully. Since we do know from Aaron Davis's lines in Homecoming that Miles Morales does exist in the MCU.
I don't want those weapons in this neighborhood. I got a nephew who live here. Yeah, sorry, Miles. I'm not gonna make it.
Then Green Goblin dives in, snarling, "Can the Spider-Man come out to play?" Calling back his creepy line to Tobey Maguire Peter over the phone in the 2002 film.
Can Spider-Man come out to play?
And he bombs the box, causing the spell to spill out around Liberty Island. I love how the VFX caused that tear to turn something that should be in the deep background feel like a canvas that is way closer to us. And in this chaos, MJ slips and falls from the scaffolding, the framing exactly matching Gwen Stacy's slow-mo death drop in 2014, scaring the hell out of all of us. Tom Holland Peter dives after her, but he gets swiped by Goblin, so it's up to Andrew Garfield Peter to step up to catch her, redeeming his failure to save Gwen, but they do it in a really cool way, because notice this time he focuses more on the leap itself to catch her in his arms instead of trying to snatch her with his webbing.
Well, presumably he's relived that moment over and over and over again, and what he could have done differently. And this was the moment.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
It was his calling.
This was his redeeming moment. Yeah, that's why it was so moving to him when he catches her in his arms and you know, she's fine and she's like, no, I'm okay. Are you okay? You know.
All to avoid that whiplash that actually caused Gwen to die, proving that this poor guy has been obsessing over that decision every day of his life, and that is why he sobs in relief finally. We get another little sorcerer set up for Ned when the Cloak of Levitation catches him, which we get a little leitmotif of Doctor Strange's theme music there too. Get this man a cloak. And then on the fallen giant Captain America shield, Tom Holland, Peter, and Goblin duke it out, and it is vicious. Peter prepares to kill Goblin, lifting his glider to bring down on him the same way Captain America nearly killed Iron Man in Civil War, using the tool that Peter is now standing on. This kid is moments away from going full John Walker, but Tobey Maguire Peter jumps in, grabs the glider, even though Tom Holland Peter shoves that glider even closer to him. Ultimately, he helps him see the light and to make a different choice, and so Tom Holland proves his change by hitting Norman with the anti-serum and giving him a second chance. Meanwhile, the sky opens up to dozens of glowing silhouettes, presumably other characters who know Peter Parker is Spider-Man from other universes. One of them holds a spear, looks like Kraven the Hunter. Others match the shape of Rhino. There's another one that kind of looks like Scorpion. I'm gonna go deeper into these in another video too. So Peter and Dr. Strange realize that the only way to seal up these cracks is to complete the memory wipe spell as it was intended, meaning everyone will forget Peter is Spider-Man. Notice how, whereas the runes before were thinner, more rushed written, here they are bolder and more authoritative, like the runes cast by Scarlet Witch in the WandaVision final battle. So Toby and Andrew make their final goodbyes, and Toby says, "It's what we do," recalling recalling how Aunt May justified why you should help people. And Peter explains it all to MJ, and he promises he will come find her. Just reminds me a lot of that theme from Eternal Sunshine, how love is too powerful of a force to be bound by memory. And MJ tells Peter that she loves him, but she doesn't let him say it back to her, wagering that the first time he can say it to her on the other side, it'll be so pure and real that that could be the thing that awakens her. And then so, after the spell is complete, the world continues to know that Spider-Man exists, but the name Peter Parker means nothing to them. This is crazy, because it means that Ned and MJ still made it into MIT, but with no physical evidence of Peter Parker's history with them. So in addition to brainwashing everyone's memories, this spell must also have warped all of reality to erase documents, any kind of digital records,
that's what
any
I was
physical mark
wondering.
that Peter Parker left on the world. I mean, does the guy have a birth certificate? A social security card? I would say that that should have to necessitate a new history to be conjured to replace the Peter history that was erased. But, and I hate to point this out, but if you think about it, Peter was often absent from his major events in his life, from his homecoming dance, from his field trips, from his school competitions. He was blipped for 5 years. It's depressing to realize this, but his erasure is not that disruptive to his friends' lives. I mean, essentially, this just means MJ and Ned spent more of their teenage years alone, which for MJ, reading a book by herself is just kind of who she is. Ned tinkering with his Legos is who he is. I mean, yeah, it's sadder the more you think about it, but it's true. That's why Peter makes this sacrifice, because he knows his loved ones can get by without him. And so when he finds them back in the Peter Pan coffee shop, himself a kind of Peter Pan stuck watching kids grow up and move on without him. However, MJ still wears the Black Dahlia necklace. So somewhere deep down, she still loves him. And the coffee cup she gives him reads, "We are happy to serve you," a cup that he holds on to remind himself to serve. By the way, we actually saw the Sanctum Apprentice with one of those coffee cups earlier when she was trying to fix that same artifact that Thor also broke in Ragnarok. That cup also showed up on the dashboard of the Tracksuit Mafia in Hawkeye episode 5, and Peter almost says to MJ, "I love you," but he stops himself and he waits upon seeing the Band-Aid because he doesn't want to hurt MJ anymore. So to protect her, for now, he walks away. Peter visits May's grave. You'll notice the flowers cover the birth and death dates. I guess because, as Tony Stark observed when he first met May in Civil War, we never do quite know how old May is. Happy shows up, doesn't know who Peter is, but he compares this feeling to losing Tony. And Peter sets up his new apartment. I am praying that they can find a way to make Mr. Ditkovich his landlord. You'll notice he has a GED test prep book, and that's because this guy has no academic record anymore. Also, we see he sets up his Palpatine Lego, which was the first we saw of Ned Leeds back in Homecoming. And he wears a new suit with brighter blues and swings out past 30 Rockefeller Center, where the upcoming finale of Hawkeye will be set. I don't think we'll see Spider-Man swinging in the background of that, but a guy can dream. Being a stranger to the community Peter Parker relied on is so painful, but it does force this kid to mature into the selfless hero that his forebears showed him how to be. At times, the life of a hero is a lonely one, but all those people are still there, and they may not remember, but they still love him, and one day he will find his way home. That is everything I found in this heart-wrenching and beautiful Spider-Man film, but there's so much more I want to say about this movie, so to support our channel and help us do that, please check out one of those great merch options at newrockstarsmerch.com. That strange entitlement design is calling to you.
Wow, so, okay.
Yeah, that was a really, really great breakdown.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I'm impressed because the movie just came out a couple days ago. I'm like, okay, that's a lot of information to unpack. Like, I wonder if Eric Voss ever sleeps. Like when these things are happening, I wonder if he gets any rest at all because he's like unpacking all this stuff. I mean, that's a whole 2.5 hour film. How many times did he go back? How many people went with him? Like, I don't know how big the new Rockstars team is.
Right, yeah.
And so I have no idea like how many people are like unpacking this information to help him script out these ideas, the analysis of it all. There was a lot of nuances in there. The biggest one was actually mentioned early on and then brought back again, which is the necklace.
Yeah.
It's like, that's actually quite touching.
It is really touching. Like, watching this breakdown actually made me appreciate the movie even more. And I think, you know, he's absolutely right. This movie is, you know, a very moving one. You know, like...
My hair's a mess.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Like, you know, disregarding some of the problems with it, some of the questions, like, he kind of brought it up with Electro, like, wait, but how is he here when it wasn't ever really addressed that he knew who Spider-Man was. Like, he knew that Spider-Man was Peter Parker, but it's like, that's okay. You know, like, we can forgive it for all of the kind of refrigerator logic questions because it has so much heart.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me as much for some odd reason. It's like him being in the film, the idea of him being in the film was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I just didn't care for the execution. Like, I didn't like that his look was completely different. Someone was justifying it in the comments I saw because like the moment he turned, like he had a different look, but like...
Yeah, no, I saw that as well.
But I don't I didn't buy that. Like, that wasn't enough for me, because he was a completely different person from where we left off in the other film, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Right.
Whereas,
But I think too what that person was saying is like, as soon as he became Electro, he had like a different personality. He was more confident. He was cooler and all of that. And I get it, but still, he felt like a completely different character. Yeah. There was no real continuity there.
So anyway, that aside, I enjoyed all the specifics in this. Like the comic, I didn't. Some of these were, some of this was covered ground already in the trailer breakdowns and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I appreciated the revisiting of the information to solidify it more. I'm curious about that comic now that this is loosely based on.
Yeah.
Spider-Man One More Day or whatever it was called. The minutia of like the spell being the pentagon shape, because the sixth one was him keeping his memory of Spider-Man or something. I did wonder about that at the end of the film, if Doctor Strange was like just saying everyone's gonna forget about you, including me, but he's gonna maintain like a spark of it in his own memory to help out Peter Parker presumably at some point.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, it would appear that the spell had to be done properly, and that's why he was really sad, you know, because there is no way, because if he didn't do it that way, then it wouldn't have sealed up the way that it did.
Yeah, well, another thing I appreciated hearing here was the references to the motifs or the themes of other, Spider-Man films.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. Even Doctor Strange, like I didn't catch all that. I wouldn't have been able to pick it out myself.
Yeah.
I watched the film 3 times and I'm like, it just sounds cool to me. Like,
yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, we like it. Keep doing it.
Yeah, but hearing the specifics in this breakdown video is pretty awesome. He mentioned something here that I didn't catch when I watched the film. For some odd reason, I heard it a different way when Andrew Garfield says magic is real here too.
Yeah, I didn't catch the two.
Yeah, I thought he just said magic is real here.
Yeah.
As in, like, he doesn't have that in his home world.
That's what I thought as well. But I mean, I trust that they were analyzing the crap out of this, so they probably heard an extra word that we didn't.
Maybe people were cheering every time we watched it at that point.
Yeah.
Because, like, we watched it 3 times, like I said, and even on the 3rd time that we watched it, which is at 6 a.m. at IMAX, when Garfield shows up, people were cheering.
Yeah.
Like,
everyone was losing their damn minds, quite rightly so.
If nothing else, like, because it's early in the morning, right? If nothing else, that was a moment where people were cheering.
Yeah, like every time each Spider-Man entered, that was the rapturous cheer moment, which was awesome.
I was surprised that he didn't call out the song that was playing when Spider-Man was trapped in the mirror dimension. Because, Eric Voss always calls out the songs being played. And there was a Christmas song playing when Spider-Man was swinging through the mall in the mirror dimension. And I don't know what that Christmas song is. I can't remember.
Either.
But he didn't even mention it by name. So
it's probably not important then.
It might be. I mean, everything else is. So, you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
One of the coolest details I thought that showed up here was how Doctor Strange and everyone is like in 4D chess, and Spider-Man is like, oh no, it's just simple. And,
Yeah, it's a simple geometry. Geometry's freaking hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but I mean, I guess when compared to calculus.
Right, but just coming at it with a simpler mind in order to find a solution, I thought was a cool touch.
That's really sweet.
Thanks so much for hanging out. Hopefully you enjoyed our reaction and discussion. Subscribe to New Rockstars, subscribe here, hit that bell icon, all notifications, and vote this up, please. I am Jaby Koay. This is
ACHARA KIRK.
Peace out.